Welcome to the fourth hour. It is 6 a.m. out on the West Coast, at 9 a.m. here in New York, and we are following a number of stories this morning. President Trump is ramping up the pressure on Republicans who are pushing for all of the Justice Department's files about convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein to be released. This comes as a White House official tells MSNBC that the upcoming vote on the matter is a, quote, losing battle. Meanwhile, new polling shows that the president's approval rating remains low, as does his handling of a number of key issues for voters. And at the same time, foreclosures jumped 20% last month, the latest real red flag coming from the housing market, while employers are warning soon-to-be college grads to brace themselves as the job market may be about to get worse. Joining the conversation for this busy hour, we have President of the National Action Network and host of MSNBC's Politics Station, the Reverend Al Sharpton. Contributing writer to the New York Times, Molly Jong-Fast, and staff writer at The Atlantic, Mark Leibovich. A great group to join us here. Thank you all. Mark, let's start with the Jeffrey Epstein matter. As I wrote in The Atlantic last night, this comes at the worst possible moment for this president, who just saw his party lose bigly in last week's elections. We just went through it. His poll numbers have really suffered. There's some real warning signs for the economy. His tariffs seem in jeopardy before the Supreme Court. The list goes on. And now suddenly it's the story he just can't shake. And it seems like one issue, one of the very few issues in which Republicans are willing to defy him.
Yeah, I mean, Epstein it's like this kind of gnawing ache that he's had to deal with. And you're right, it does come at a bad time for him for a few reasons. One, he's kind of in the low range of his approvals. I mean, he's always been kind of maybe 36 to 48 has been his range when he's been president. And, you know, he spent a fair amount of time up in the mid 40s. But it's been sort of a precipitous drop in the last few months. And, you know, those last numbers are pretty dicey for him. And you're right. I mean, the Epstein story is not the kind of thing that, one, is going away easily, and two, there is a drip, drip, drip quality to this, both in terms of the revelations that are coming out, the changing of the stories that you're hearing from the White House. I mean, some days they're defending they're obfuscating in different ways, and certainly the Republicans in the House and Senate, who have been pretty much operating or sort of chanting from the same hymnal in defense of him, really they break in all directions on Epstein. So it's kind of an awkward story for him, and it keeps going and going and going. And it also, on the heels of the shutdown, which seemed to really sort of, have some, ignite some divisions within the Democratic Party, this sort of has covered up for it. And it's sort of, he's back on the defensive. And obviously going into the holidays, it's not a good story for him.
No, and the polling shows, Rev, that he's underwater on the economy, significantly so. And J.D. Vance last night gave an interview to Fox in which he basically passed the buck, blamed the Biden administration, even though Trump has been in office now for nearly a year, still blamed the Biden administration, returned to old hobby horse of blaming migrants for housing. I mean, a lot of it's sort of nonsensical answers, and it's really striking to me. It seems like even though the voters really delivered a verdict to Republicans last week, hey, you're not doing enough on prices, you're not doing enough on affordability, it seems like the crew in the White House doesn't really have a plan.
Donald Trump has announced a new platform that shocked everyone.
For many years, I have been searching for opportunities that allow people not just to survive, but to thrive in today's economy. And today, I am ready to share with you one of the most promising areas I have created, which will help many people achieve financial freedom and confidence in the future. Follow again bit.com, enter the special word USA25 to claim your wonderful bonus of 1,500 USDT. Make America great again.
It seems like they don't have a plan and they don't have a solid reaction to the vote that came overwhelmingly against them last Tuesday. You would think they would have said, this is a wake-up call. Maybe there's a message here. and be humble and then come back another way. They're arrogant, like it didn't happen. And then you're going to blame it on Biden? Well, you were the one that said day one you were going to do A, B, C, D. You knew Biden was on his way out then anyway. So why did you make those commitments? And then on top of that, you have these Epstein emails that people had never seen that clearly infers that he had something on the president or the president knew something. And even the Christian right has a problem. I mean, they gave a pass on the tape where he said he was going to grab a woman's privates or what you could do. They gave a pass on that. But now you're talking about children. And now you're talking about their kids. And now you're talking about how right-wingers got to go home and look at their wives and say, I condone that. Even if he didn't participate, if he had knowledge and did nothing about it, it's hard for them to swallow that.
And Molly, you know, we talked a lot in the last week or so about the Democrats, those 8 senators, deciding to vote to reopen the government. There was a lot of consternation. Some Democrats really disagreed with that. And certainly I heard from a number who were like, look, we've got momentum right now. Why are you doing this? And this is going to damage our enthusiasm. Well, the events of the last couple of days have sort of reignited that enthusiasm, and they're doing, Democrats, it seems to me, and let's hear what you think, doing the right thing by largely kind of getting out of the way a little bit of some of this stuff, because the Epstein matter, you know, obviously it's a human tragic story. We should never lose sight of the victims there. But in terms of a political story, it's one President Trump is just wearing, and it's dragging him down.
Yeah, look, the way these emails were released and the way oversight has handled this, and including the ranking member on oversight, Robert Garcia, has been really seamless. Like, the information is out there. It is, and again, we can never lose sight of the fact that these are children. These are now women whose lives have been completely destroyed, one of whom committed suicide. I mean, just the sort of darkest human tragedy. But the information has gotten out there, and there's so much of it, and it's so damning, and every which way you look at it, and it's just thousands of emails. And I do think that that was handled extremely well. And again, like, Donald Trump has a base that has been, like, you know, has long believed, or at least a section of the base has long believed in QAnon and Pizzagate and these kind of conspiracy theories. So here are emails where you don't even have to thread the needle.
Yeah, you really don't. And, you know, Mark Leibovich, you look at everything that's going right now. I mean, when it rains, it pours, and it's really pouring politically on the White House right now. You can look at the 36% approval rating of the latest AP poll. Right track, wrong track, sitting around 33%. Only 1 in 3 Americans think the country's going in the right direction. 2 out of 3 think the country's going in the wrong direction. And here's this AP approval poll, 62% disapproving. This is record lows for the president in this term, and it's approaching his record lows for the last term. You also look at other polls showing only 33% of Americans agree with how the president is running the federal government. Only 33% of Americans agree on how the president is running the economy. Only 34%. Hello, Democrats. Pay attention, Democrats. Only 34% of Americans agree with the president and how he's running health care. And he's even at 15 percentage points upside down on immigration because, again, the heinous scenes that we're seeing of children once again being ripped from their mother's arms, teachers being ripped out of schools that they're teaching. And all of this is a toxic mix. And then you add on top of it the Epstein issues, and it feeds into something that you wrote about a couple of days ago. And you actually wrote about this before the latest news broke on Jeffrey Epstein. And that's talking about Donald Trump, a lamer duck than ever. And you write in part this: beyond the undertones of lost influence, being a lame duck can also suggest a president distracted, disengaged, but biding time. But lame duck also carries with it connotations of diminishing cachet relating to a leader's lost status and creeping powerlessness. Trump and his allies have worked to foster a sense of unquestioned authority and permanence, and they're very successful doing that. Yet Trump has looked much less daunting, invincible in recent days. And we can talk about all of the things that he's done, but he didn't go out Mark, didn't go out and campaign for these candidates. He didn't campaign for the big, bold, beautiful bill or whatever they called it. And a lot of Republicans right now, they're just treating him differently. I mean, you talked about him going up and ordering Republicans to kill the filibuster. John Thune the next day said, that ain't happening. And you said even one senator laughed out loud at him.
Yeah, Mike Rounds did, North Dakota, South Dakota, one of the Dakotas did. I mean, I do think what's interesting is that the kryptonite Trump would have is any lost influence with Republicans. I mean, I think he has always, I mean, his numbers, like I said before, have fluctuated. I mean, 74% for Republicans' approval is high, but it's not that high. I mean, we're talking about pretty much almost a quarter of Republican supporters sort of falling away from him. And that's sort of the base for him. I mean, that's what has always been what has sort of sustained him even in precarious times like this. And when that starts falling away, you know, Republicans sort of see that, and they know that they have a permission structure to disagree with him, to not do what he says. And that's sort of what he was accustomed to, certainly for the first year of this presidency. But when that goes away, he becomes a lamer duck. And I think that's what we've seen. Really, a benchmark for this was the elections last week. And as you said, I mean, the Epstein stuff, which happened in the last couple of days, has, I think, really reasserted that as something that isn't going to get any better any quickly for the president.
Well, not even in Mike Rounds' home state of South Dakota.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, apologies. Yeah.
No, well, you had the Dakotas right.
I did.
So. Yeah. This is true. Ed Rogers, sort of his power broker in Washington, D.C., a Republican guy who, along with Haley, they've been just part of the Washington Republican scene for a very, very long time. Ed Rogers told you that Donald Trump would use that sort of third-term threat, third-term constitutional scholars would call it a scam. Use that in term to push off what he called lame duckedness, which is, you and I both know, that is a term in Alabama. But it is interesting that when he said, no, I can't run for a third term, Mike Johnson said, no, he can't run for a third term. Even Amy Coney Barrett said the same. Well, there's a constitutional amendment. He can't run for a third term. There's been that sort of growing sense that, yes, Donald Trump will not be in the White House forever. And Republicans seem to be starting to worry about their own futures.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, here's the thing about that. I mean, the third-term gamut is kind of a joke. I mean, it's constitutionally a non-starter. But as long as Donald Trump says it, I mean, Republicans in the House and Senate, or anyone who has to get elected, has to kind of take it seriously, because if they are seen as not taking it seriously, as sort of being disrespectful to that idea, however absurd it might be, Donald Trump's going to notice, and he's going to sort of take it as an affront, and that's the kind of thing that can get them in trouble. So, I mean, in a way, he's created this precedent for no matter what he says, no matter what possibility he floats out there, it has to be given, some sort of serious credence, at least publicly, even if these Republicans don't know. So it's a weird dance he has, but he's obviously not saying it as much, and no one's taking it seriously anymore.
Mm. Well, and let's be very clear here, Jonathan Lemire, there still are a lot of Republicans that fear Donald Trump and are going to do everything they can to stay on his good side.
Oh, no question. The number of those who will dare defy him, that's going to be the exception rather than the rule. And that will be so even as if he moves further and further into lame duckedness or whatever that was. But, Mark, let's talk, though, about how in some ways that's going to potentially hamstring the Republican Party. They're going to still be sort of, in fealty to Trump. There's not going to be that sort of natural evolution we see in the back half of a president's second term, where it's like, okay, let's start thinking about who's next. And we're already seeing some jockeying here, quiet jockeying, to your point. You don't want to anger the president, whether it's J.D. Vance or Marco Rubio, or some have speculated Marjorie Taylor Greene, or maybe a Trump family member. There's going to be a lot of people eyeing 2028, assuming the president indeed gives up power. But if he's going to clearly be a domineering figure throughout until January 19th, 2029, 29, that'll make it hard in some ways for the Republican Party to figure out what's next and who should lead them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a very delicate sort of tightrope that people like Vance and Rubio and whoever might want to run in 2028, will have to walk because, Trump might reluctantly have to give up power, but he's not going to give up the spotlight. I mean, that's going to be something he is going to be loath to do. And I can see him, in a couple of years, all the press coverage goes to Iowa, wherever the candidates are, him doing everything possible to sort of kind of wrest it back to whatever he is doing. But also, probably demanding complete respect and almost reverence from the candidates about the stuff he's done when, in fact, they're going to want to be distancing themselves. And again, I mean, if this were a normal president, they would sort of respect the normal ebbs and flows of how 8 years plays out. And, but Trump's not the type who's going to be grooming his successor or going to be spending a lot of time thinking about, quote, the next generation of Republicans. I mean, that's not his speed. I mean, he wants to be seen as like the be-all and end-all and permanent figure of the Republican Party, and that's not going to go away anytime soon.
That's not his speed. An understatement, to be sure. The new piece online now. Staff writer at The Atlantic, Mark Leibovich. Lebo, thank you as always. Coming up here on Morning Joe, despite all of its flaws, American dominance remains the word.
Watching all of us today. So here's my message to those beyond our borders. America has been tested, and we've come out stronger for it. We will repair our alliances and engage with the world once again, not to meet yesterday's challenges, but today's and tomorrow's challenges. And we'll lead not merely by the example of our power, but by the power of our example.
That was then President Joe Biden in his 2021 inaugural address, emphasizing America's resilience on the global stage. A new book titled The Case for American Power echoes that sentiment and argues the nation's superiority in politics, economics, and culture is needed now more than ever in an increasingly dangerous and chaotic world. And the book's author, Washington Post columnist Shadi Hamid, joins us now. Shadi, thank you so much for being with us. There was a time in the past where even talking about American exceptionalism would be frowned upon and would get catcalls from the back. Things have changed a little bit now when people understand, even our European allies, especially our European allies, understand that America as a force of good is badly needed in the world. And if we're not there, if there's a void, then sometimes chaos creeps into that void. Talk about your book and what inspired you to write it.
Yeah, so I think there's a big problem now. There's a kind of crisis of self-confidence. I mean, you're right that a lot of our partners realize our importance, but a lot of Americans are in this kind of mode of self-doubt. There's actually a remarkable Gallup poll that in the early 2000s, about 85% of Democrats were either extremely or very proud to be American. That number has dropped to 36% in 2025. So this is a real problem on the left, where people simply just don't believe in American power. They don't even believe in the idea of America. And I wanted to kind of offer a case to young people, to progressives and other skeptics, and say, America is worth fighting for. It's worth believing in, despite all of its faults. We're not perfect, but we're far preferable to the alternatives. And those alternatives are mainly China and Russia. So when you look at it in that more realistic way, right, you start to realize that we have a lot to be grateful for. But I worry, and I've had this experience when I say things like, I love America, to some of my liberal friends, they'll look at me like I'm crazy, like, Shadi, how can you say that?
Well, you look at what America has done, and I agree with you. There are people that, say, oh, you're overly simplistic, say this to me, oh, you're only saying that because, you're a white man born in the middle of the 20th century and blah, blah. No, America has fed and freed more people than any other country on the planet. We've made terrible mistakes along the way. But again, like you said, when we're not out there trying to do better, to trying to move towards a more perfect union, things go sideways. And I'm always struck when I talk to leaders in regions that are sort of torn between dealing with China and dealing with the United States, dealing with Russia and dealing with the United States. And they will tell me flat out, you guys are more powerful, so we have to deal with you a lot of times. But man, China's a lot easier to deal with because they don't bother us about human rights. They don't ask us about how we're treating our workers. They don't ask questions that, and then they just say, we don't care about. We're in this for money, and the Chinese understand that. You Americans, you ask too many questions. You stick your nose in places that are none of your business, like human rights. The Chinese don't do that, and it's at that point where I go, I wish all of those people that are saying there's really no difference between the United States and every other country on the planet could hear the conversation I'm hearing right now. Because China, Russia, other tyrannical countries, they think we're a pain in the ass because we do worry about human rights. We do worry about the sort of things, or at least we used to, the sort of things that, defined U.S. foreign policy after World War II.
Yeah, I think you're right that people are sometimes annoyed, but that's part of what makes America great. The fact that not only do we have power, but we have a sense of moral purpose. And when you combine power and morality, you have a really unique mix that no other country has. We've been founded on that moral purpose from day one, even though we've been flawed in executing it until Donald Trump. I mean, Donald Trump, in some ways, is the first president who doesn't even pretend to have these higher aspirations and higher ideals. I hope that post-Donald Trump, we can return to that tradition. And I'll just say, when I was in the Middle East during the Arab Spring, when people were protesting for their freedom, they didn't look to China or Russia to come to their defense. They looked to the U.S. They knew the U.S. often falls short, but they still had a sense that maybe America would do the right thing. I was in Tahrir Square in Egypt, and people were hanging on Barack Obama's words, waiting to see what he would say. So I think we have to, that is something to be proud of. And as a child of immigrants, I'm extremely proud that we are a democracy. My parents did not come from a democracy. They came from an authoritarian regime. And that's why I think someone like me can make this case a little bit better than, say, like a random white guy,
like me,
and that's
exactly.
Well, you're not Random Joe, but yeah.
Random Joe, exactly. Yeah, no, I get exactly what you're saying. And, you bring up a great point. And Reverend Al, we're a big country. We have made big mistakes. Iraq, Vietnam. I can go down the list of the big mistakes we've made, but we've got a hell of a lot more things right. And up until the last couple of years, we've had our eyes on the prize. We've understood at least what values we're supposed to move toward. And it's so interesting. I love telling this story for people who talk about America and are critical of America. It's one thing, we criticize the direction. We criticize our leaders. That's one of the things that makes us Americans. We're constantly fighting to move forward to a more perfect union. But I had a friend during the Iraq War who was from Turkey, and every day he was constantly attacking the United States. We're horrible this way. We're horrible that way. After about a year of it, I said, man, listen, nobody's keeping you here. If we're such an evil country, go back to Turkey. I've been listening to this every day for a year. If we're so bad, why are you still here? And he said, America, it's a lot like Hollywood movies. The bad guys always seem like they're winning. And in the end, somehow, some way, just barely, the good guys come through. And he talked about the civil rights movement. He talked about, after Vietnam, the United States understanding its mistakes, after Watergate, the reforms put in place. And I just thought it's sort of a beautiful way to hear about this country from an outsider's perspective. We make mistakes, but he's kind of like Churchill, who said the United States will do the right thing after exhausting every other possibility.